This is True Crime Out Loud.
I'm your host, B.
And I'm your host, Jen.
And this week's case is going to take us to Newtown, Connecticut, located in Fairfield County. Now, Newtown is part of the greater Danbury metro area and also part of the New York metro area. Around the time of this case, the population was 19,000, but this area has grown steadily to nearly 28,000 in the past few years. It has a land area of approximately 59 square miles and a median family income of $119,000. And Newtown is like any suburb. It is a commuter city with many people living there commuting to New York to work, as it's only about 42 miles away, or to Hartford, Connecticut to work, which is about 45 miles away. The Housatonic River flows through Newtown along with other parts of Connecticut and Massachusetts and is about 149 miles long in total. Newtown is known as one of the safest communities, not only in Connecticut, but in the entire United States. Caitlyn Jenner attended Newtown High School when she was known as Bruce Jenner, and Newtown has Newtown High School and 4 public elementary schools: Hawley Elementary, Hedo Meadow Elementary, Middlegate Elementary, and Sandy Hook Elementary. And of course, all of our listeners, I'm sure, and pretty much everybody has heard of Sandy Hook Elementary. It was the site of a school shooting on December 14th, 2012. The shooting was perpetrated by a 20-year-old, and we won't mention his name here because I don't believe in giving notoriety to these mass shooters, but this 20-year-old male entered the school that had about 700 students in it at the time and killed a total of 26 people. 6 adult staff members and 20 children ages 6 to 7. That perpetrator then shot and killed himself as police approached to apprehend him. So now that we know a little bit about the area, we'll get some background on our case. And living in Newtown at 5 Newfield Lane was 49-year-old Richard Crafts and his 39-year-old wife, Helle Crafts. And they had been married for 11 years at the time of this case in 1986. Helle was a flight attendant for Pan Am Airlines, and Richard was a pilot for Eastern Airlines. They had met in Miami in 1969 through the circle of both being in the same industry, the airline industry. They were married in 1975. Helle was a native of Denmark, and her mother still lived in Denmark at the time of the case. In 1984, Richard had been diagnosed with colon cancer and was only given a 2% chance of survival, but miraculously he had recovered. Richard had been a pilot in the United States Marine Corps, and that's what kind of prepped him for his career as a commercial pilot, but he also served as an auxiliary police officer for Newtown Police Department and was a part-time officer in Southbury, Connecticut.
Our case began on December 1st, 1986, when Helle Crafts was reported missing by Keith Mayo. And you're going to learn who Keith is here in just a moment. Helle had not shown up for work, and no one knew where she was, so her co-workers contacted Mayo. Police are told Helle had returned to New York after a flight to Frankfurt, Germany on November 18th. And she was dropped off at her home by another flight attendant, Gertrude Horvath, on that same day. And this is the last time her co-workers saw her. And 2 weeks later, the co-workers reported her missing. So Richard Crafts, the husband, tells police the last time he saw his wife was November 19th, when she left to go visit a friend in the Canary Islands. But when police speak to friends of Helle, they were immediately suspicious of her husband, Richard, which, in any case where a wife goes missing, that's the first person that's looked at. The friends said that they had asked Richard about Helle's location, and he gave various answers, and some were kind of evasive. Richard told several people, including the live-in nanny/housekeeper, she did a little bit of both, that Helle had to make an unexpected trip to Denmark to be with her sick mother. He told others that she had gone to the Canary Islands to visit a friend, and he told a few that she had gone to Florida. Well, when police get involved, his answers about her location are obviously going to be investigated. They contact Helle's mother, Elizabeth Nielsen, who still lived in Denmark, and she said Helle had not been to visit her and she wasn't even sick. She said the last time she saw her daughter was on July 26, 1986, when she stayed for 3 days. She said she did not expect Helle to visit again until April of the next year. But her mother had received a letter from Helle. She told her mother that she had informed Richard she wanted a divorce, and Richard was not happy about the idea. Now, Richard might have lied about visiting her mother, but that's what he told friends. He tells police that she's in the Canary Islands. Well, the police locate Helle's vehicle at Kennedy International Airport in Queens, New York.
Well, sounds like they got plenty of leads to investigate, and that's what they do. They do begin an investigation into Helle's whereabouts. And the first thing they're going to do is check into the possibility that she's in the Canary Islands or possibly Florida, but they don't find a record of her taking a flight or going on a flight with her employer to anywhere. They also talked to a private investigator that Helle had hired. This private investigator's name was Keith Mayo, and I'm sure that rings a bell because we said we'd be telling you about him later. So what is she doing with a PI? Well, she had hired Keith Mayo because she suspected Richard was having an affair. And Mayo was able to provide evidence and photos of Richard having an affair with an Eastern Airlines flight attendant named Nancy Dodd. Dawn Marie Thomas, the live-in housekeeper nanny, said that the Crafts had been involved in an argument on November 18th. She said that she had gone to her other job that she had at McDonald's in Danbury, Connecticut, and did not get home until around 2 a.m. on November 19th. She said Richard woke her up early that morning and he was acting weird. Got the housekeeper and the kids out of the house and said they were going to his sister's house because there was a power failure during the snow the night before and there would be a lack of heat. And she said that the house had plenty of kerosene heaters, a fireplace, and a generator, so this kind of struck her as odd and didn't make any sense. She said that Helle was not there when they all left, but Richard said that she had left earlier to go to his sister's house. The housekeeper said that he was in such a hurry that Richard didn't even dress the kids in warm clothing, and he should have because it's cold outside and they were going to have to drive in bad weather conditions to make it to the sister's house. Helle was not at Richard's sister's house, and he didn't ask his sister about Helle or even mention her being there when they arrived. She said that Richard left her and the kids there and he went back to Newtown for the rest of the day and then came back to pick them up later that evening. When he picked up the kids and the housekeeper, he said Helle had to make an unexpected visit to Denmark to visit her sick mother. Now, the housekeeper also tells police that when she came back to the home, she saw that there was a large dark stain on the carpet in the master bedroom, and Richard kind of explained this away by saying he spilled kerosene on it. He got rid of the carpet a few days after that. So, kerosene would not leave a dark stain on carpet. We know that. And that immediately raised the suspicions within the police. The housekeeper also told police that Richard got rid of a freezer in the garage and got a new one, although to her knowledge, the old freezer worked fine. The police conducted an interview of Helle's divorce attorney, Diane Anderson, and Helle had told attorney Anderson that if something happened to her, don't think it was an accident. Now, Helle had made statements like this to several other friends of hers also. Why would Helle have a divorce attorney? Well, the same reason that she had a PI. At the time of her disappearance, Helle was preparing to file for divorce from Richard due to his extramarital affairs.
So far, all of these things look suspicious, but of course, investigators are going to keep digging even further. They find that Richard had bought a large new freezer on November 17th. Now, this is the day before Helle was last seen alive. Richard tells police he got a new freezer to replace the old one because it was not working properly, and he put that old one in a dump. On November 20th, so 2 days after Helle's last seen, he rents a U-Haul truck and a wood chipper. He told the rental company employee that he had cut down some limbs on his property and was going to chip them up to get rid of them. Richard returned the wood chipper on November 21st, and the employee, Peter Grossbeck, saw a chainsaw inside the truck. Now, Richard tells police that he didn't leave home on November 19th after he dropped the kids and the nanny off at his sister's, but his credit card record showed something different. It showed that he had purchased new bedding on November 19th. On November 20th, there were several witnesses that came forward that saw a U-Haul truck and a wood chipper in the areas of Newtown and Southbury, to include a bridge in Newtown. Now, one of these witnesses was Joseph Hines. He worked for the street department, and he was called in early that morning to run a snowplow because it was the first big snow of the season and they needed to clear the roads. He said he saw a man with a U-Haul truck using a wood chipper on River Road, and this was between 3 and 4 a.m. The man told Hines that he was cleaning limbs that had fallen during a storm on November 18th. But police find there were no known tree limbs to have fallen on his property. Another witness is a Southbury police officer, and he knew Richard because, remember, Richard was a part-time Southbury police officer. He said he saw Richard about 4 a.m. on November 21st as this officer was leaving work. He said Richard was near a school parking lot near the police station with a U-Haul truck and a wood chipper. Richard told this officer that some limbs had come down around his house because of the storm and he was cleaning them up. So, wood chipper, rental truck, where do the police search? Well, they know the area of River Road is going to be of significance. So on December 30th, police began to further search those areas with a forensic team and a forensic pathologist. And what kind of case would this be without Dr. Henry Lee? True crime fans know Dr. Henry Lee. We know his name. But in case you don't, Dr. Lee is a very prominent and well-respected forensics expert. He even worked on the O.J. Simpson case, the John Benet Ramsey case. If you've seen the Staircase on Netflix with Michael Peterson, he did some work on that case. But at this time, we have a young Dr. Henry Lee, and he was the Connecticut State forensic investigator and headed up this forensic team. So they're on the area of River Road, and they began to thaw the snow a little at a time and sift through soil. They find wood chips, but they also find an envelope addressed to Helle Crafts. They keep searching because they want to find more, and they end up finding 2,660 pieces of evidence, including a fingernail, the upper 1 inch of a human finger, a cap or a crown for a tooth, a toenail, and hundreds of strands of human hair. Now, the crown for the tooth was matched back to Helle Crafts, along with all of that other evidence. Now, at the time, of course, there's no DNA, but they do blood typing, and the blood type did match Helle Crafts. They search underneath the water near the bridge, and they find a chainsaw in the water with the serial number filed off. They also find what I saw described several different ways. Some say a serrated blade or a chain for the saw. Reports vary on this, but they're all consistent with it being some type of cutting tool. Now, this blade contained blood, tissue, and pieces of hair. So they conduct a search warrant at the Crafts' home. Police find a smear on the master bedroom mattress that appeared to be blood. So they tested and confirmed that it was blood and it was consistent with Helle's blood type. They also find a receipt in Richard's possession for the rental truck and a receipt for the rental of the wood chipper. They were able to retrieve those filed off serial numbers for the chainsaw that was recovered under the water, and it's the same serial number on the warranty card Richard Crafts had filled out for his chainsaw. Richard also made a statement to his brother-in-law that was very peculiar. So the brother-in-law heard that they were putting divers in the water, and he tells this to Richard. And Richard said, "Let them dive. There's no body. It's gone." So investigators, with all this they've got, they piece together the events of the crime. They believe Richard killed Helle in the bedroom of their home on the evening of November 18th, 1986, by striking her with a large police flashlight. Now, Dr. Henry Lee theorized Helle had been beaten with a blunt object. Police never found the old freezer that Richard had gotten rid of. They believe he got rid of it because he had put Helle's body in there. They said after he gets his kids and the housekeeper nanny out of the home, he takes her body to a plot of land where he used a chainsaw to cut her body into smaller pieces. The next day, he takes those smaller pieces to several locations around Newtown and Southbury and disposed of her body by running him through a wood chipper. And he was probably thinking that this would completely destroy her remains, but he was wrong.
So who is this Richard Crafts? I mean, we know now that the police suspect him of running his wife through a wood chipper. But who is this guy? Well, he was prominent for the time. He had an income of $120,000 a year, which would be a decent income by today's standards, but was a massive income in 1986. But although he had a large income, he also really liked to spend money. And Helle found out that he had spent some of that money on gifts for women, but not for her. Richard was also aware that Helle was going to leave him, so he told her some terrible news, that his cancer had returned. Helle was able to contact Richard's doctor, and he told Helle that Richard's cancer had not returned, and in fact, he was in great health. Richard later confirmed to the police that he was, in fact, having an affair on Helle, which they already knew from speaking to the investigator. Helle decided to go ahead with the divorce at the time of the disappearance, and she was actually waiting for him to be served with paperwork. So all of this adds up to plenty of motive for Richard to want Helle dead. And so on January 13th, 1987, Richard Crafts was arrested for Helle's murder, and he was given a $750,000 bond. And although he has this huge income of $120,000 a year, Richard Crafts is unable to make the $750,000 bond.
So the next step, of course, is going to be a trial. Now, it used to be impossible to get any type of conviction for murder without a body. And they don't have Helle Crafts' body. They have a few pieces that's not enough to say, hey, she was necessarily murdered. Well, his first trial began in 1988, and Richard actually testified on his own behalf. The prosecution presents that Helle was terrified of her husband and feared for her life. Her friend, Susan, testified that Helen had told her she was concerned for her safety and concerned Richard might harm her because he had physically abused her in the past, and he lied to her about things, including the affair and the return of his colon cancer. Another friend testified she became concerned when Helle had not shown up for work, and she thought something had happened. There was foul play. And so she calls Richard. And Richard tells this friend, hey, you've been watching too much TV. Helle had told some of her friends that she could just not move away from Richard because he would be able to find her wherever she went. After 17 days of deliberation, that first trial ended in a mistrial. There was one juror who would not vote to convict, and he basically walked out of the deliberations. So they have a second trial in 1989, and it had to be moved from Newtown to New London, Connecticut. And in November of 1989, after 8 hours of deliberation, a jury of 10 men and 2 women found Richard Crafts guilty of murder, and he was sentenced to 50 years in prison. In 1993, he filed an appeal saying that the evidence was circumstantial and insufficient, and that nationwide publicity that the trial received prevented him from receiving a fair trial. But the state Supreme Court did not agree, and they upheld his conviction. In late 2019, early 2020, he was released from prison for good behavior and moved to transitional housing for veterans. So he spent 32 years in prison. Richard's sister, Suzanne Bird, and her husband Michael, they supported Richard. The children of Richard and Helle were put into the custody of Richard's other sister, Karen Rogers. And Karen did not side with Richard. She supported the prosecution. She wanted the maximum sentence for her brother. In the end, Richard's children were able to receive his pension fund, but Richard received none of it.
So some of the unique things about this case is this was actually the first trial in Connecticut that had a first-degree murder conviction with no body. It was also the first murder trial in Connecticut where cameras were allowed in the courtroom. This case was the case that was used for the very first episode of Forensic Files, Season 1, Episode 1, which aired in 1996. Now, I don't know if True Crime Out Loud listeners are as big a Forensic Files aficionados as Jen is, but she has seen them all over and over and over again. Trust me, I have to sit through them myself. Keith Mayo, the private investigator hired by Helle Crafts, was a big part of getting her disappearance investigated as a murder, and he unfortunately died in a car accident in 1999. And Helle's divorce attorney died in 2012.
It's also been theorized that the movie Fargo was based on this case, which is not exactly true. I mean, the Coen brothers uses several things. I think the significance of it to the Helle Crafts murder was a man's woman goes missing and at some point a wood chipper's used. But there's no factual evidence to back up it's based on this case.
Yeah, it doesn't really follow along with it, although it is a great movie. I can't help but chuckle when she says, Prowler needs a jump. Prowler. We don't call a police car a prowler in the southeastern half of the U.S.
So for our discussion, I wanted to talk about this conviction without a body. That is a huge thing that happened because, I mean, even now it's hard to get a conviction without a body. But we're talking 1986. DNA can't say, oh, well, there was this much blood and it all belonged to Helle, and if she lost this much blood, she would be dead because she was run through a wood chipper.
Yeah, and I see this, this is obviously a monumental case, but that seems kind of weird to me in this instance, or I guess to put it better, I can see why this case ended up going through without a physical body. We know that a wood chipper is involved, okay, and there's not a whole lot that you can do to your body with a wood chipper that wouldn't cause death. So if the premise is we don't have a body, so we can't prove that she's dead. All right, but we find a bunch of her hair, a piece of a finger, some teeth. I mean, I don't know. I think it's pretty safe to say that that person is probably not alive if we know that a wood chipper's involved.
Well, I don't think it's an issue of saying that that person isn't alive, but saying it's Helle Crafts because you're just doing blood typing at this point. And I believe her blood type was O, which is very common blood type.
Yeah, so I guess if the only evidence they could draw directly back to her was her dental records, I don't guess they could say that the chunk of finger they found was hers, but it's definitely tougher to get a conviction without a body. One of the things that struck me with this case is like cutting up a frozen body.
Well, you and I have talked about this because we talk about some really weird things, but in the reports, they all varied. Some said he killed her, put her in the freezer overnight, cut her up, and then ran her through the wood chipper. Some say that he killed her, put her in the freezer, cut her up, put her back in the freezer, and then ran her through the wood chipper. And then some say he killed her, cut her up in pieces, and put the pieces in the freezer, and then ran her through the wood chipper. Now, if he put her whole body in the freezer the night before, and then he's going to cut her up the next day, her body's not going to have time to freeze solid. So that's still going to be easy to cut up. But if he had put those pieces, like cut her up in pieces and put that in the freezer, and those had time to freeze solid, that's gonna be a hard time running through a wood chipper.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I guess it depends on how big the wood chipper is. I mean, they're designed to, cut up hard woods, some very dense trees and stuff. I don't know. I guess it's just kind of a macabre thing, but I wonder, is it easier to cut up a body that's frozen or not frozen? I mean, maybe do you freeze it so that it doesn't make as much of a mess? Like if it's frozen solid and you have a chainsaw, now maybe it makes cleanup easier or something.
Yeah, because your blood's not going to be running everywhere. That would make sense.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the only thing I could think about. I don't know. Probably that we shouldn't be spending a whole lot of time thinking about dismembering bodies.
I know. I mean, it's terrible to think about in those terms, but I think about those things, and you're right. I think freezing a body or at least chilling it down a good bit is going to keep the blood from running everywhere, and so there's not going to be a whole lot of blood evidence. But even I would think cutting a chainsaw is made to cut through wood, but I think about like cutting up a frozen chicken with a chef knife versus cutting up raw chicken that's not frozen. It's a lot harder to cut that frozen. So, yeah. I mean, that's kind of the only terms I have to think in, because I've never even used a chainsaw. Not gonna lie, not at all. Not even to cut wood. So I don't know, but it seems like it would still be hard.
Yeah, who knows? It's just one of those things that kind of leaves me wondering. I don't know. Not that it really matters. It's a horrible crime anyway. One of the things that struck me is this case. I mean, I know he was only a part-time police officer, and I do think that being an airline pilot, I mean, that's one of those jobs that requires you to respond well in stressful situations. I mean, you should be able to handle stressful situations, and your daily job is what most would consider a pretty in-depth task requiring a high level of intelligence. And he's a police officer, so he's got some limited exposure to how policing works, although he's only a part-time officer. And it seems like he just plans a really, really sloppy murder.
Right. I mean, like he's disposing of her body with a wood chipper around town where people know him, instead of going somewhere. It's like, hey, Richard, how are you? The other officer, how are you today? I'm good. I'm just cutting up some limbs. I guess he thought that he was smarter than everybody. Nobody was going to figure he ran his wife through a wood chipper.
Well, and when we were talking about this, it kind of made me wonder if he was showing himself to everybody in the truck. I don't want to say to establish an alibi, but it's like, oh, that was just Richard. He wasn't cutting up a body. He said he had some limbs in the yard he had to cut. I don't know. It's weird that it seems like he almost went out of his way to be spotted by, I mean, why was he sitting in a school parking lot that's across the street from the police station in his U-Haul and wood chipper?
Because he was chipping up part of her body there too, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, I wouldn't think that would be running in the parking lot of that. I didn't get that from the material. I thought that he's there in the parking lot with the truck, towing the wood chipper or whatever, when his buddy, the full-time policeman, rides up and goes, "Hey man, what you doing?" "Oh, nothing. I've rented this wood chipper here to go take care of some sticks in my yard." Yeah,
I think if you're running a body through a wood chipper, being across the street from a police department is probably not where you want to do that. But like you said, it would make more sense if he was making sure people saw him with the wood chipper. Oh, I had to take the kids and the nanny, the housekeeper, to my sister's because of the storm and had a bunch of limbs down, and I was chopping them up, and that's what I was doing. But the thing it goes back to is that he actually bought that new freezer the day before Helle came home.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he was planning something. And it could have very well been that old freezer didn't work.
Well, it was just, but I don't know. I mean, it was,
But he put her body in something, they think.
well, and I'm not contending that he had a plan. I mean, I think he had a plan, just think he had a real shoddy one. So he may have decided prior to her coming home that he was going to kill her or whatever and purchase the freezer. But the plan is just garbage from the start. I mean, it seems like we tell everybody we know a different story about where she's gone. Like the police aren't going to be able to track that down. Well, wait a minute, buddy. You said that you told so-and-so that she went here, but you told us that she went there. That just seems all kind of very Bush League for a guy who you would think would be average to above average intelligence based on other aspects of his life.
Well, and I think you'll agree with me on this from our law enforcement backgrounds is that people who think that they're smarter than everybody else and smarter than everybody else doing their crimes tend to be sloppy on some parts because they're going to be like, oh, well, the police they're too dumb to even realize this. So they're sloppy on some parts because they think nobody's as smart as them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's true. I mean, he was wrong, though.
Yeah, he was wrong. This is a good case. He's now out, and we don't have any follow-up to where he is other than he was released in the last year or two.
And on a personal note, and then we'll close it out, I just don't know that people convicted of a crime like this should ever be paroled. Is somebody who runs their wife through a wood chipper ever really rehabilitated? I don't know. I have a hard time with that.
We let emotion play into that aspect of it. It's no different than somebody else who kills their wife and dumps their body in a river or buries them in a field somewhere or out in the woods. He just happened to run that body through a wood chipper because at that point she's deceased.
Well, but I don't know. I don't know because there are certain things, and we also know that, things that are done to bodies are often used as enhancements to a crime later on in other areas. I'm not talking about the murder of a spouse. Okay. Obviously there's no legitimate reason to murder a spouse, but when we're talking about sentencing guidelines,
are you saying if a wood chipper's involved, they should never get out is what you're saying?
No, I'm just saying that this seemed like it was premeditated with a crappy, albeit crappy, but premeditated plan. Okay. It's premeditated. He kills his wife and then disposes of her body in this heinous way, which does show to me, I believe, maybe more indifference to her than other ways of disposal. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting off on a tangent here, but I think if there are homicides where parole might be a acceptable thing to me, such as in a fit of rage, that person snaps and kills someone, or we hear all the time of heat of passion crimes. All right. So somebody kills someone in the heat of the moment, right? They see something that they're so angry, they instant. But I just personally don't feel that given what we know about the crime, that it's appropriate to parole him. I don't know.
Well, they have in Connecticut, and it was done away with in the mid-90s, but they have what's called statutory good behavior. And for your good behavior and for working in the prison, you get time off. And he had enough statutory good time. Like I said, they've done away with that, but they had to follow the guidelines that were in place when he was convicted.
Well,
so
sure.
That's how he wound up getting time off and got out 18 years early.
Well, sure. I just don't feel like, I don't know. I don't feel like we can ever say for certain that a person that commits a crime of this nature is ever truly rehabilitated.
Well,
that's just my opinion, soapbox. I mean, it doesn't really mean anything. It just, that's horrible for his family and now his kids. So his kids who are adults, now dad's out. What if dad tries to reach out to them or something like that? I mean, I don't know. Maybe my idea of justice for the family is skewed.
Is bigger than Yeah.
And it could be.
Well, and in the end, that's who needs the justice is the family.
Sure. Well, we hope you enjoyed this week's case. And as always, we'll see you next week. We would like to hear your thoughts on this and all of our cases. And as always, you can reach us by email at truecrimeoutloud@gmail.com, Facebook and Instagram at True Crime Out Loud. Out Loud is 2 words, not one, and Twitter at TC Out Loud.
Photos, links, and sources for this case can be found on our website at www.truecrimeoutloud.com.